How many times have you buried your best ideas because you were worried what other people might think? That fear may be costing you more than you realize, and today's conversation will show you how to break free from it. Welcome back to the You Potential podcast. I'm your host, Sean Maslick. Today's guest is James Victore, described as part Darth Vader and part Yoda. He's the creative thought leader whose work hangs in museums and places across the world, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. He has spent decades helping people find clarity and purpose through bold creativity. He's going to challenge everything you think you know about success and what it really takes to live authentically. You'll discover why your weirdness, yes, your weirdness is actually your competitive advantage. James shares his journey of building a creative empire on his own terms. We'll explore why creativity isn't just for artists. It's fuel for fulfillment, and what he means when he says, I'd rather die with my reputation than a few extra dollars in the bank. If you're tired of playing small or searching for that spark of meaning you know is still inside of you, this conversation is going to hit differently. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with James Victore. James, welcome to the show.
Sean, I am damn happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Well, I am delighted to have another conversation with you. There are so many areas that I want to go down. Your new book is fascinating, and I think it really hits the central theme that I want to talk about today is recognizing ourselves for who we are, how weird we are, and really celebrating that. So I thought it'd be really important to start with, James, what made you weird as a kid?
It's so funny, Sean. So I wrote, I started this book, Hey Weirdo, and the core of it was 8 long format interviews that I had done with high-end professionals from, vast and varied fields. And I sent it out to some early readers. And there were essays, there are other pieces in it. I sent it out to some early readers. And they all came back and they said, James, there's one thing missing. And I said, what? They said, all of these conversations start, what made you weird as a kid? I want to know what made you weird as a kid, right? It's like, it's like, I forgot that part. It's so funny. You don't know what you know, and you kind of the things that you know and the things that come so easy to us. And this is creatively a problem. The things that come so easily to us, we discount. So I had forgotten that I needed to tell my story. So the last thing that I wrote in this book was actually, what made me weird as a kid. And if you really want to know,
I do.
There is a memory. There's a memory that I've had my entire life. And it must have been when I was 4 or 5, because at the time we lived on a military base. I was brought up in the military. We lived on a military base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the memory is of a pool of melted crayons on a hot cement porch. So you can just imagine this exquisite melange of colors, right? And I remember it as this thing of beauty. And the funny thing is, I've been thinking about this in my career for a long time. And oddly enough, my work, whether it's typography or design, my work tries to emulate that constantly. And I didn't realize it. And until recently, literally like 2 years ago, I had to check and make sure it was actually a memory and not something I had just conjured, right? And I spoke to my mom and I said, hey, Mom, do you remember melted crayons on a porch? And she was like, oh, yes. And of course, from her recollection, I could see how she remembered it. And she remembered it not as something exquisitely beautiful. She remembered it as who's going to clean that up? Why did you do that? We don't own this house, right? Like a mom. So Sean, the funny thing is, the thing I remember as beauty and expressionist that I try to put in my work has also embedded in it strong emotions. And that is something else that I constantly work for, constantly shoot for in my work, which is hilarious.
At the beginning of Hey Weirdo, it talks about this idea that I really like how you go down like the historical meaning of weird, but you talk about weird is through our own lens, our own perspective. When I was hearing the story about your mom, I was like, I wonder if she's going to be like, who's cleaning this up? But of course, because that's our lens as parents.
Yeah.
When did you really start to realize that this idea of weird, because usually weird is like this, like you describe in your book, an outcast, something we don't celebrate.
Yeah.
But this idea that weird is our own lens, and why not celebrate that as opposed to shun it out of the tribe, so to speak?
Yeah, it's I mean, that's why I go into the whole etymology, the whole history of it, because I'd like to take that word. I mean, listen, Sean, I fucking hate the word weird. I hate if someone calls me weird.
Yeah.
Still. And it's because I've heard it so much in my life. And it was always in a derogatory form. Even when I was a kid, I was called, in school and home, I was called creative, and it wasn't a compliment, right? It meant you're coming from left field. It meant you're not within the fold. It meant you're expressionist, you're messy, you're dangerous. So I'm still not comfortable with that word, and I think part of the reason to write this book is that when I was writing my previous book, I put a line in there. It's become my most popular print as well. And it's just a line that says, the things that made you weird as a kid make you great today. And that thing has a lot of impact for people. I get a lot of people responding to me about that. So besides just making a print of it, I decided to start looking up the word weird and see where it came from and find its lineage and where it went wrong. And also tried to kind of start through my own recollections and my own story of being weird, started to realize, oh, you know what? This is just what makes me me. Like when I was a kid, and I think everybody, and part of the reason to call it Hey Weirdo and have this book is that I think everybody really kind of recognizes that in themselves. Many adults probably have shunned it so deep inside them that they're afraid of it. But when I was a kid, like I was full of sing song, and I liked making jokes and puns and music and, like a kid, right? And I used to always get in trouble for it at the dinner table or whatever. I wasn't taught boundaries. I was just taught I was too much. I was too young. I was too loud. I was too messy. I was too stupid. I was too this, right? But listen, I was just fucking trying to be a kid. I wasn't trying to be messy. I wasn't trying to be too anything. I wasn't trying to be a jerk, right? So we get castigated, we get shunned, we get shut down. All we're trying to be is ourselves. All we're trying to do is figure out this thing, this body that I'm stuck in, and how does this work? And what happens if I talk loud, right? Just this silly stuff. But what happens is, it makes people uncomfortable if you do that. Like I was in a relationship not that long ago, and I was married, and the woman I was with, the mother of my children, we would be walking in a shopping center or something, and she'd say, "Hey, I love you," and I would go, "You know what? I'm gonna tell everybody," and I'd say, "I love you." And, oh my God, she hated that. Because it was about other people. It's always about fucking other people. All of our thoughts, all of our decisions, all of our actions, all of our fears are about other people. God, so now as adults, we've learned to censor ourselves. We've learned to be afraid of our weird. We've learned to be afraid of other people's weirdness. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. We spend a lifetime being afraid of it. And then
Uh-huh.
we create these artificially safe, unsafe, actually, safety nets that we assume are going to follow the right things society deems as acceptable.
Yeah, you gotta
But yet,
get yourself normal, boy. Get yourself normal.
yeah, get a job.
Oh,
You know,
fuck yeah.
I was preparing for this and I was really thinking about weird. And in my town here, well, it's a city in Canada, it gets cold as it does in Canada, and the snow melts in the springtime. And without fail, there's this one guy who rollerblades around. Those are like skates with wheels on it,
Yeah.
in cargo shorts and no shirt on. It's only like 5 degrees, so like, I don't know, 36, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. No shirt with a guitar. And he just rollerblades and sings. And
Awesome.
everyone thinks he's this weird guy. I'm like, a week ago, I saw him. I'm like, thinking about weird. I'm like, that guy is awesome. Why do I always think he's weird? Probably because, like, for me, I had a big shy story, and I would love to be able to do that. And I would probably would want to, but instead, I'm like, he's weird. He's not
Yep.
normal. But
Yep.
really, this guy's just singing and creating joy on his
Yep.
roller skates.
We are so afraid of what we're capable of. We're so afraid of our potential. And we're so afraid when we see it exercised by other people. It's crazy.
So you're on this mission to speak about what made you weird is your superpower or your greatest gift. If my research is correct, I don't use weird in a bad way, but your name started out kind of weird. Was your name spelt wrong and it was actually James Brain Victore?
That is true. That is my actual middle name, right? And
Brain.
that's hilarious. There's another fuck. I forgot. I'll put that in the book. I got to put that in the damn book. Um, yes, I was reared in the military. We were bounced around until I was 5. When I was 5, we lived in 5 different places. But I was born in Mountain Home, Idaho, on a base. And my father, being of Italian heritage, wanted James, and my mother, being Irish, wanted Brian. So I became James Brian. So technically I'm James Brian Joseph, named after my father, Victore. And the pediatrician, the doctor said, okay, and he wrote it down, James Brain Victore. And it's funny because, I think that is now part of my lineage, part of my story, part of the truth of the whole thing. How an accident like melted crayons could be perceived as beautiful, and how an accident like a misspelling can be perceived as potentially powerful or
Yeah.
funny.
Or both. Italian Irish, I could sense that feistiness coming out in this conversation as well. It's a good
Yeah,
lineage.
they were teenage lovers from the Bronx, New York. They met in the Bronx in high school, and were high school sweethearts their entire lives. So yeah.
Well, and speaking about your parents, you mentioned your dad, he was in the military, so he traveled. I want to specifically talk, though, about your mom and your relationship with her. So you have this melted crayon situation. And it sounds like while she was thinking, oh, I got to clean up the mess, it sounds like she didn't like make that whole event as like oh, it's a big mess. James, what did you do, etc. It sounds like she was, from reading in your books, in your first book, Feck Perfection, but it sounded like she allowed you to step into some of this creativity. And one point in particular I want to point out is that when she was working in the library, you would go and sit and be bored, so to speak, with all these books. And she would help. I don't know if she gave you books or helped you understand, hey, maybe you should read some books. But my question here is, as a child, how important was that unstructured, maybe opportunities to be bored, really influence your ability to be creative, as opposed to now, it seems like with our kids, it's like structured sport activity here, 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 where it seems like your mom just let you be which perhaps helped you become creative or hear the creative voice inside?
Yeah. I often say I am who I am either because of or in spite of my parents. I think my creativity scared my parents. I know it scared my dad. Um, but also my father was in the military and traveled the world. He was gone basically until I was 11. But when would come back, he would bring things from Thailand or things from Madrid or things from Goose Bay, Labrador, or bring artifacts and um, um, objects that when you're from a small town in upstate New York, you just wouldn't see. He brought the world to us. Like he spent a lot of time in Vietnam, so he brought home like these chopsticks with typography on them and brought home all this stuff, not knowing that he was going to influence me. And like you said, yes, my mom was a secretary in a university library. Knew I liked to draw. I had to wait for her there for her to drive me home from school, so she would put a stack of picture books in front of me. But these picture books were design annuals from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. So it was Graphiche International, and it was Italian design annuals and print design annuals, and so I got this design history. Um, um, and it's funny because now she's heard that story a couple times, so now she's like, "Oh yes, I know, I made that." So,
I meant to.
um, but yeah, it's funny because the influence of parents it can be very strong. I have a young protege who wants to be an artist, and her parents, when she was young, would bring her to gallery shows and museums because I think they liked the idea of culture, and thought that she did. So one day she wrote, she invited them into her bedroom because she said, "I have something to show you," and she had painted what she felt was the most beautiful portrait of her parents that she could. Right, so she brings her parents in for the opening, and they come in, and the painting, is drawn on her bedroom wall, and they flipped. She's telling me the story, and I could see the quiver in her voice. They flipped, and emotionally, that trauma fucking destroyed any chances of her ever having her own creative spirit, having her own creative work. Because I mean, she would work as an assistant for basically the rest of her life, never being the show, but always being associated with creativity. And that's a shame. That's a shame. That's like, it's just fucking paint. You can paint it over, like, or put a frame around it better. Right. But we do that, and my boy Wyatt just turned 10, and Nova's going to turn 8 in July. I see it all the time. I see that creativity, that surge of creativity constantly in them. And I do my best to teach them boundaries. Because otherwise it would be, "Oh my God, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck, no, God, leave me alone," right? So I have to teach them boundaries, because all they want to do, and I love this. This is what, Sean, this is what you and I lack in our lives, and this is what most creatives lack in our lives, is in the part that's been shut down. And for my kids, it ain't been shut down, and I love it. And it goes like this: "Hey, Daddy, look at me. Look what I can do." Right? Or look what I did. They're so proud. They have this creative urge, and they proud of it, and they just want to show it and express it. And we have that too, but we're so afraid of it. We can't talk loudly and funny in a shopping mall, or we can't, we can't not, like, "Oh, I can't dance." Oh my God, how many people have said they can't dance? That's such bull. Or, "I can't sing." Oh my God.
You're hitting on my voices inside my head right now. So, James, I'm curious here about two parts here. One is the children, and then the other is really powerful, is a reflection on this. What you're saying is our own narrative, like shutting our own creativity down. As someone who has had several conversations, whether it's when you're teaching art or in your coaching now, you see people on, say, the midlife when they're really coming to terms that, hey, I snuffed out this creativity from 10.
Yeah.
And now you see your children. How do you approach creating these boundaries with children where you want to create, some sort of structure and guidance, but you also don't want to snuff out that creativity so they don't end up, that midlife individual coming to speak to you, be like, James, I'm boring. I'm normal. So how do you approach the children in allowing them to celebrate melted crayons everywhere, but yet at the same time realizing some of the stuff is, it's
Yeah.
annoying to clean up messes all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm in that situation. I'm like, we don't own this house. That's a rug. It fills the whole room. I don't know how
Yeah.
to, it's like, and my kids, I just have to be very honest with them. And I flip. I'll flip. Like my daughter Nova, I have a 10-foot long, 4-foot wide, 2-inch thick dining room table made out of pecan, a beautiful table. I made it by hand. And she refuses to put paper under, like I let her paint and draw and do stuff and she refuses to put paper underneath it. And I'm like, I keep constantly going over, and I don't flip about that, but I constantly going over and go, hey, baby, I love what you're doing. You want to maybe put some paper under there, like, hey, but at the same time, I just saw a new mark the other day on there with like a Sharpie with real stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's part of life. Life is messy, especially if you have kids and you can't have a neat house and I shouldn't expect that from them. Really? Unless I'm going to raise soldiers, which I don't want, or people who are afraid of themselves, or afraid of adults, which I don't want. And quite frankly, I thought, well, you know what? This is going to be her table someday, so she can do what she wants. So with kids, often I realize it's much more about me than them. It's much more about my reaction to them. I have to teach with Nova. It's interesting because with my daughter, it's interesting because she doesn't. I believe in school that she is much more naturally dutiful, naturally like fits in and follows. And my son, being a boy, he wants to be adventurous and boisterous and climb things all the time. So he gets notes from school and stuff. And I got to go, hey, buddy, hey, what's up here? Like I have to teach him. He knows this thing. He knows this thing called the monster we talk about.
Okay.
It's inside him. And I said, it's inside me. I want, and they are hand in hand, they are conscious that I am sober. Because they know what they don't know drunk dad. They've never seen that. But I talk about buddy, there's a monster in us, and this is what he wants to do, and we have to be conscious of that and be cool with that. Like I let him go out the back and go out in the woods and use knives and use break things and he has to be conscious about what can't do that at school, can't do that here or there. We go to restaurants and I let them play. I don't let them run around, and they know the rules. But I always, Sean, great question. I'm always trying to figure out how to not snuff that out, because that would be a shame.
I really like this idea of like naming the monster inside of you.
Yeah.
My daughter has this book, and it's like, take your dinosaur to school, and then there's one to dinner.
Yeah, I know that one.
Okay, yeah. And it's reminding me of that is like, hey, the monster has a time and place. Like, to celebrate the crayons. We're celebrating the monster in the woods when we're breaking a whole bunch of shit. But, at the restaurant, the monster's got to be a little cool. And as opposed to being like, you're bad for misbehaving at the restaurant.
Correct.
It's like.
Correct. Well, and again, it's the weirdo. It's the weird part of us. But it's the best part of us. That's our spirit. I don't want a kid who doesn't have spirit. I don't want a kid who's been shut down. I want a spirited, joyful. Here's the thing: we are born, and I talk about this in the book. There's a chapter in the book called self-love, because self-love is the key. If you don't have self-love, you're not going to be creative. Because if you don't love that work and love that monster and love what you're capable of, and you can't turn it on when you want, then you ain't got nothing. And when we're kids, we're born with play and fun and love, or play and joy and love. That's all we want. That's all we want. We use play to figure things out. Like, you have a kid, you know this story, Sean. You have a kid in a high chair with a sippy cup for the first time, or a bowl of spaghetti for the first time. And what do they want to do? Take their hand and go, knock it off the, And I had a friend telling me, yeah, this fucking kid keeps knocking it off. So I finally had to slap his hand. I'm like, oh, no, because now you're showing him that he's bad for some reason. He doesn't know why. He's playing. He's trying to figure shit out. He's being creative. You're the asshole. Don't do that to your kids. You don't like the mess? Feed them outside. Like, figure it out. This is how we figure things out, by breaking things and moving things, and we just want to play, and that brings us great joy. And we also want to freely give and receive love. I see my kids when they go out into the world and how they react with other kids, and they can easily walk up to some other kid and go, "Hi, do you want to play, or do you want to be my friend?" What adult can do that? We can't do that. It's impossible. We can't freely give and receive love because we're not weird anymore, because we don't own that thing. Unless we've had a frontal lobotomy or something wrong with us, that we are completely allowed to be ourselves, right? It's
To
important.
be ourselves.
It's vital.
It's so vital. You talk about this play and joy that kids bring, and
adults can do it too, by the way.
Adults should do it, and
puppies
that's
do
where
it
it
all
was.
the time.
And that's where I was transitioning into adults. But like, my kids are 8 or 9, just turned 9 and 6, and it's just really hitting me right now. Is that, like, Sean, let that monster play. I even said to my kid 2 weeks ago, he sounds like your son. Like, he wants to go in the woods and eat the bark, eat the trees, because that's his spirit. James, I said to him, I was like, normal kids don't do this, Lewis. And he said, Dad, I guess I'm not normal. And I was like, oh no.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful. Fight for your right to party, kid.
Yeah. You know what? He actually likes the Beastie Boys. But that's part of being a dad, is we learn from these mistakes. This is not about my relationship with my child, but your conversation is just making me really reflect that comment was about me. And I think so much of this inability to tap into our creativity is our fears.
Yeah.
I have an excerpt.
What would actually happen if he ate bark? Nothing. I've also got a 28-year-old back in Brooklyn, right? Son from, another life. In our freezer, when he was 6, 7 or 8, in our freezer, we had, wrapped up in tinfoil and then a plastic bag. Can't believe I'm telling this story. One of his stools.
Oh,
because he pooped one day and he's like, Dad, come here. And he was like, look at that. And I was like, oh my God, that's a man's poop. That's awesome. He's like, can we keep it? And I'm like, okay. Because why the fuck not? Who cares? And people are going to go, oh my God, they're going to give me all the reasons. Oh my God, that's so unsanitary. That's so this. And how did you wash your hands? Like, fuck off. You know what? Fuck off. Those are your fucking fears. You can go bitch about those in the closet by yourself. Leave me the fuck alone. I'm teaching my boy that he can do anything he fucking wants. And I'm teaching him the safe way to do it.
That is awesome.
There's nothing weird about it. It's just it's just letting him be him. And he's 28 years old, and he still fondly remembers that story.
Yeah. What ended up happening to it?
We moved and he wasn't around when I was moving, and I was like, oh shit, I got that poop in the freezer. And I don't, so I kind of like at the last moment kind of had to chuck it. And, I didn't tell him and he was like, hey, where's my, and I didn't realize that it was a part of him. So that was my mistake. It meant something to him. And he was a little peed, if I can say.
And I appreciate that story, because yes, it's funny because it was a piece of poo, but the message, like you said, is yeah, we can do that. It's not weird. You're a kid who is
There ain't no
curious.
rules. There's no
There ain't no
rules.
rules.
If you got rules, then keep them away from me.
So I have this excerpt from your new book that fits into what we're talking about, and I want to read it for the listeners, and then I have a question about your continuing on your story here. It goes like this: we are all born perfectly weird, full of play, joy, and love. But by the time we turn 10, we've already been pulled in a dozen different directions, told who we are, which is an interesting point there, told who we are, who we should be, how to act, and what to believe. We become a tangle of emotions, struggling to find our way. Many of us lose sight of our own true north and end up going down a path that is not our own. That one was powerful to me in the sense that this podcast is about what does it mean to live a good life, to enjoy this trip we call life, and to think that many of us are losing sight of our own true north and going down a path that's not our own.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to reconcile with.
Yeah. No, it's when you start realizing that it can be very painful. Yeah.
So I want to specifically talk about you at 19 years old. You're full of energy, this joie de vivre since moving to New York City to become the world's best poster artist. What did New York teach you about this joy, play, love? And yet, what, if anything at all, did it teach you about going down a path that might not be our own?
Interesting question, Sean. Thank you. In the beginning, when I was first in New York, I went there with high hopes, as they say. I won't break into the song, high hopes, but I went there with high hopes. I had, because I had seen those books. That was dangerous. That peed in my pool, right? I had an idea of what it was going to be like, and then I got there, and I got there and went to the School of Visual Arts for that purpose. And when I got there, I realized it was not what I was thinking. Right, there were rules, and it was slow, and there was like, where are the posters? Where's the creativity? Where's the and I didn't have anybody really kind of showing me my voice. There was kind of like, here are the rules of typography, or here's how you color, here's colors that go together, and here's colors that don't go together, and here's and here's like how you draw levels of gray. So, and like I was like, and then computers came in, and it was like all you're learning is tech, right? So that was difficult because I had to kind of really step aside and go, okay, if that's not my path, then what is my path? And I had to go back. I had to look back and it wasn't like then I looked back and I said, I have the melted crayons, right? I've got that in me. It wasn't that, but it was the lettering on the chopsticks. It was the fake Toulouse-Lautrec poster in my basement when I was a kid. It was the heroes in those books, whom I eventually went and met all of them. Right? That's when I started. I dropped out of. I was asked to leave the School of Visual Arts, and I immediately started on my own journey. And when I first started out, I was doing what I thought was expected of me as a quote unquote professional, and that's what happens to many of us. We're filled up with, we're hopped up with all this creativity and all these big ideas in school, and then we get out in this is the real world, sir. Like this, we don't do things like that here, right? So we start learning to love the smell of fluorescent lighting and gray cubicles, right? And I was doing that for a while. I was working freelance as a book jacket designer, and I was making book jackets look like book jackets, or as I call it in the book, I was making the obviouser. And I realized, God damn, I'm making money. I bought my first motorcycle cash, right? I was wearing nice suits, but it wasn't fulfilling. I said, I got my own sense of humor. I got my own sense of play. I got my own sense of color and proportion and shape, and and I want to play that out. And what happened is, creatively, my clients didn't, the publishers in New York didn't want to work with me anymore. So that's a hard lesson. Okay, what do I do now? What I do now is I do the smartest thing, or the dumbest thing, depending on where you come from. I stuck to my guns, and I went and found my clients. Because that's the thing. We think as designers, we think we're these universal puzzle pieces that just fit everywhere. But what's not true. We can't just work for every client, because what we're doing is we're making ourselves submissive. We're listening to other voices, not our own. We are catering, right? And we're shoving our own voice down deep, going, I'll give you, and then we do those things like somebody on Instagram that was talking about, how working with clients, and here's what you do, and you send 3 to 5 suggestions, and then there's these revisions, and I'm like, oh my God, why don't you just give them knee pads? Why don't you just give them shackles? What the fuck? Like, no, there's no 3 to 5 suggestions. I'm a creative guy. I'm going to give you one. It's going to be really good and you're going to like it. That's what you paid me for, to make fucking decisions. Not to go, oh, I have this one. Oh, you don't? Oh, how about this one? Oh, how about this one over here? Oh, let me redo that one. Oh, let me do this one. Fuck off. Fuck off. That's bullshit. And that is designers ruining the job for them and everybody else. Sorry.
No, and when you say designers and you talk about this creativity, for listeners,
this creativity thing
that we all seek, and I say we all seek, this is not just reserved, this conversation, for designers in the sense of visual art. I'm going to make a poster. This is your message is all of us.
This is, as you said, you living your best life. This is your, my creativity, and I can't speak for everybody, but my creativity is washes over all of my life. It's how I drive. It's how I dress. It's how I treat other people. It's everything. It's how I talk to the cashier at the grocery store. It's everything.
And it must feel damn good when you step into that.
Again, you're so close to yourself that sometimes it feels, uncomfortable, but that's the job. Again, it's like, okay, my clients don't want to work with me. What do I do now? Fuck. Am I, you're like, okay, I got to find my own way. Or the cashier doesn't respond and you think, oh no, they hate me.
That inner critic just starts going.
The critic. Oh my God, the critic is strong. Critic is strong in this one. Yes.
Well, okay. Speaking when things aren't going your way. So we're back in New York. Things maybe you're maybe not stepping into the way you see your creative life going, but yet you decide to scrape together some money and take on this project of the 50 or 500th anniversary of Columbus. Is this a moment where you decided to step into that creative side of James and really take a chance, despite that potential inner critic or the choir of voices that might be telling you, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. You're talking about the Columbus poster, my first poster. So yeah, I had, when I was a kid, when I was 8 and 9 and spending time in the library, I'd seen all this work. I'd seen all my heroes, right? And a lot of it was posters. And I was so turned on by the history of Olympic posters, or posters that started wars, or posters that ended wars, right? These moving things, or even the most seductive, sexy posters for tea. Really, that's what Capaiello's posters were. They were for tea, or they were for, whatever, or, Lucian Bernhard, so yeah, I wanted to become a poster designer. And there I was working in New York as a book jacket designer. I was like, oh, wait a minute. Where's that job? Where do I get that job? And that job didn't exist. So yes, the 500th anniversary came along, and there was actually a competition that I was not invited to because I was nobody. in Europe, it was sent out to like all the big fancy poster designers. And I kept track of these guys and I knew what was going on in the poster world. So I decided to make one on my own. And I used my rent money to get them professionally printed. We got 5,000, two color black and a basically a sepia kind of color, 2-color poster, 5,000 printed. And then I figured out how to get them professionally put up. There was a mafia run by the Greeks. I found out they were all Greek. And what you did was, when you talked to your printer and said, hey, I got, the guys, they're going to hang this for me. So take those 4 boxes of posters and bring them to the door, the rear stage door of Lincoln Center at a certain time at night, and they will take it from there. So I had them do that, and they just put them into these vans, and my posters went out to get put up next to Calvin Klein and, movie posters and stuff throughout New York. And it was fucking amazing, but it was my rent money. And when rent came due the next month, I got, dunk, dunk, dunk on the door. Right. And I went down and I'm like, hi. They go, James Victore? I said, yep. And they're like, eviction notice, because I couldn't pay my rent because I had spent all my money. And I was a clown because I was afraid. And I was a clown because I didn't save that eviction notice, because that eviction notice was my fucking ticket. That was my fucking freedom. And it cost. My freedom had a price. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and she did not like to get eviction notices. She did not like a boyfriend who was not paying rent. So she left. And she too was the price. There is a price for your freedom. I have a great, you're talking about living a life. I have a great life. I've got 2 fantastic kids who are wildly creative and extremely loving to me and each other. It comes at a price. It comes at a price. I often look around and go, okay, it's April. What's going to happen in July? Just like looking at the bank, like what's going to happen? Is there going to be a time when I'm going to have to scramble, or can I, right? So, and that's just one of the things that you learn to accept. Everything has a price. My work has never been about the money. If it was, I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing. I had breakfast with this young designer this morning, and I told her this story that I hadn't told anybody. I'm going to share it first time with you, Sean. And
Yes.
so my first exhibition, I've had two shows at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. My posters, 5 of them up on the wall on the 3rd floor at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. But my first show, I brought my parents to town, and I brought them to the show. And after the show, taking them to dinner, we're having dinner, and I shouldn't have opened my mouth, but I asked, my mom, hey, what'd you think? And she said, don't you do anything nice? I'm like, what? I don't know. She wanted Degas dancers, or I don't know what she wanted. And I realized that if I made work that made my mom happy, like most people try to do, I think, what do soccer moms want? What does the client want? If we cater, if I made work that made my mom happy, I would not have a career. I would not be a happy dude. I would be bitter. Like I'd be looking around going, what did I do wrong? And what I did wrong is I wasn't myself, or I wasn't willing to pay the price. My mother loves me. I'm the third of 3 kids. I know I'm her favorite. So that's cool. So we're cool, Mom. We're cool. But, I don't make work to make anybody happy. Although when I'm in love, it's really great, because then I'm making work because I'm a show off and I want to make her happy. I love that aspect of it. I'm back to like my kids. Hey, look at me. Look what I can do.
Yeah. See me. Look at this.
Yeah, it's cool.
James, thanks for sharing that story. I can't help but think of a quote that I've heard you say that I wrote down for this episode. And it's around this thing you said, everything comes with a cost. Like the eviction, that was a cost, but your freedom comes at a cost. And this quote it was Henry David Thoreau that I've heard you say a few times. Most men lead lives of quiet desperation. This is because we know in our hearts what we're capable of, but we took a job instead, something that pays. I'm always fascinated in this push-pull relationship between living a good life, if that means getting outside, being with your kids, tapping into your creativity, coming to who we are, with this societal desire to have more money, the influence of money. How do you reconcile? And I understand many of us are always still on a journey, but I'm just curious how you reconcile this push-pull relationship between what society says is successful in terms of money, and then how does James navigate that? And I'm not talking about dollars and cents in investing, but the internal dialogues that you have with yourself.
The internal dialogue is a bitch, I will admit. I would like to think I'm giving my children an amazing life and great opportunities. But at the same time, I'm like, but you're not taking them to Hawaii, like you're not. And I realize sometimes I have to really battle myself because I realize this simple, beautiful life that you're talking about is actually quite simple.
It is.
It's very easy. It's like go outside. Instead of saying to them on the weekend, go find some kids, right? Go play outside, go find some kids. Often, I'm a divorced dad, so I have them every other week and a good amount of time, but only half the time. So I've had half of their childhood stolen away from me. So when they're here, I don't send them outside to play with other kids. Often it's let's go in the backyard, let's go in the woods, because I work for myself, so it's very easy for me to say, go watch cartoons, daddy's got to work. That would be the easy thing. And it happens, but we always do movie night together. We always play outside some together. Last weekend, we spent 2 days and we built a catapult. It's big. It's not bigger than me, but it's big. And then we practiced. We were at the end of the driveway, and I don't know what the neighbors think, but I went to the second floor window over the garage and opened that window up all the way. And we're at the end of the driveway, and we're trying to loft wiffle balls into the room. Right? I'm like, God, I hope this is fun for them, and hope and Nova just loves creating anything. She stands at that table and she's got pens and paper and all the tools and everything that she could want, and she invents things. And these things are, if you come to my house, like I said, I'm a single dad, but I can't imagine bringing a woman over here because she's going to go, you live in a playground. Like there's like kids art everywhere, right? So I like to think I'm giving them a beautiful life, and I think the beautiful life has zero association with money. I would love a second car. I'm a muscle car guy. I would love one of those, and maybe I'll get one someday. But I can't change who I am in order to do that. I think if I keep my nose down and I try to stay weird and I try to stay honest and authentic with people, that's the important thing. If I die with this reputation, I will be very happy. If I die with a couple more dollars in the bank, it ain't gonna make a jack shit of difference.
I appreciate you sharing your lens, and I think this is something we all wrestle with. And the way you respond, it has nothing to do with money itself. It's these stories or these things that we trade up or trade to do it. I mean, it comes down to how do we want to balance our time, energy, and money. Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing building catapults and playing in the backyard is super fulfilling to you. And, like you said, it'd be nice to have that extra car, but not at the cost of not doing those activities with your kids, I'm hearing, and the art,
Yeah.
your creation.
Yeah. 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 And you do, if you go and then you get into that thing, if you do get a fancy car, then you're like, no ice cream in the car. Don't touch
Yeah.
that. We're at a paint job, right? You turn into one of those.
Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Um, you're now stepped away from a few years back, I believe, from the New York scene. You moved. Your work is different than it was for years and years. You're doing a lot more, I believe, art yourself and coaching clients on this very topic that we're talking about, embracing
Yes.
our inner self, refinding, rekindling that relationship. What have you learned? Most people, grown-ups now, what are they afraid of when it comes to recognizing themselves and their creativity?
I think you nailed it with the Emerson quote. I think they're afraid of what they're capable of. I think they're afraid of what they could actually do and afraid to take that chance. The fear is such a as Frank Herberts wrote, fear is the mind killer. It is crazy. It is crazy how afraid we are of ourselves, how afraid we are of our creativity. One of the things I do with when I throw events, like I'm thinking of there's another Camp Victoria that's going to happen in the fall, probably in Cape Cod. I'm looking forward to it. But when I allow people to play, it's difficult to get adults to play. It's funny, they're not used to that. I do corporate workshops where the first thing I say is I'm like, who here can draw? And they're all like, they're like, no, Jerry, you can
Jerry.
draw, right? They're so afraid. And then I take them through this very quick exercise, like less than a minute, like paper, they got paper and pen, like very quick. And I go, okay, show it to each other. And they start showing it. And oh my God, the room explodes with laughter and joy and play and fun. And I'm like, that that that's what this is about. That's it. That's what this is about. That's what creativity is all about. Laughter and play and fun. Like you guys are weird and you just forgot. I think that's the first line from Feck Perfection, the previous book. The first line says, we are all born wildly creative. Some of us just forgot.
Mm. So what would you say to listeners? They're thinking like, oh my gosh, I have forgot. How do we start to reclaim that relationship when we're so integrated and saturated in this normal life that we've created?
Well, you're in luck because Hey Weirdo, the book has a workbook companion. It takes you through
Nice.
all the steps to do that thing. And the steps are to some self-reflection. Look back and go, what made you weird as a kid? Like for me, I loved anything with rubber tires, anything that you could race. I loved, again, I loved that crayon color. I loved, drawing on everything. I loved playing with words. I became a writer. It's like we all have that thing. We just have to go and look, and then we have to learn the process of allowing that. That is a huge word for
Mm.
me, is allowing it. Like I have to allow it in my kids with boundaries, with respect, but we have to allow it in ourselves and know that when we let it out into the world, nothing's going to happen. We're not going to die. That's literally a line in the workbook. Here, do this thing and then do this thing. And then here's the test. Did you die? No. If you didn't die, you're awesome. Good job.
I like you highlighting this allowing. Um, I'm just thinking about even my own story. I feel like as I took off a suit and a collared shirt, I was allowing myself to not be so monotone and corporate like. And it seemed to me every morning when I'm putting that on, I'm just like, getting into my costuming up and being like, here's your normal life.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah.
And it's just
And
interesting,
for
this
women,
allowing.
sometimes lipstick is that. Sometimes makeup is that.
Mhm.
Like it's armor. Now I'm ready for the world, right?
Yeah. And I guess I want to touch on this idea. You talk about this conscious creation. You create your reality whether you know it or not. And I like this idea of like, we talk about like being conscious, but I like this like conscious creation. You take it to a whole new level. Can you just talk about this idea of being conscious creators?
Yeah, the idea is that whether we know it or not, we're creating our lives. And if you're not conscious about it, if you don't know it, you're just falling into default. By the time you're 30, 35, you're like your evenings are like sitting on a couch, gaming, eating shitty food. I had a student once from an adult workshop. It was a workshop I was doing that he worked for a scholastic publishing company, and he came in one day and he had this look on his face and he said, I got to talk to you. I said, yeah, what's going on? He said, I went home last night and I opened the door and I saw my beautiful sectional couch positioned right across from my TV, and I saw the ass divot. I saw where I go and sit every fucking night. I hate my job, hate my life, but I've got my ass divot. It was like this Homer Simpson thing. He just goes and he sits and he fixes, gets more and more uncomfortable in his personal life, but he just blurs it out, probably drinks it out too, and just sits and, until he falls asleep. And that's unconsciously creating your life. And it's unconsciously creating obesity and disease and chronic disease and stress and shingles and all the other things that go along with that. Or you're consciously creating it. Like, I've been sober for over 2 years. That's consciously creating your
Congrats.
life. I am the worst advocate for sobriety because I don't like it. I liked me, with a little levity and a little fun in me and a little, wine in me. But I'm consciously creating a better life for my kids too, and talking to them about drinking. I like baking and cooking, and I was baking a lot over the holidays, and I kind of got like this dad bod thing going, and I'm like, no, 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 that is not me, and it's not fun. But again, it's me because what do I want? I want to be healthy. I want to be strong for my kids. I don't want to. I don't want to die. And that's living consciously. I want a creative life. I have to. I have to be conscious of that in the choices that I make about what work I will or will not do.
You said it earlier. Everything comes at a cost.
Yeah,
You don't like
you
doing
make
these
choices.
things,
It's
but
all
hey,
about choices.
I see the time here. James, you seem like a guy full of joie de vivre. I said that earlier because that's what I just sensed from you. Or said another way, like, I think richness in life is so much different than having riches in your bank account. You strike me as a guy who has a richness in life. I'm just curious, you've probably touched on some things, but what really makes you happy?
I when I see Novus, Wyatt too, I sent them out to the garage once. It was a weekend. I don't know, I had something to do, and I'm like, guys, go outside. I just didn't know what to do with them, and I said, guys, go outside, and they went into the garage, and they come back about 45 minutes later, and they're rolling in a skateboard, rolling it into the house, like this grand, reception, this grand showing. Sitting on the skateboard is a small stool-sized chair that they made. They used a handsaw and dowels and some pieces of plywood, and they made this, quite frankly, beautiful. Like, the proportions on it were beautiful, and they brought it in. They're like, look what we made you. And then they take it off the skateboard and he sits down on it, like that level of creativity that made them very happy. And me too. It makes me happy to get into that flow and to make stuff. and to make stuff because I know what's at the end of me making that thing. You know what's at the end is me being able to say, "Hey, look what I did." For
Going back to
you,
that.
Sean, for the world, Sean, to put stuff out into the world and go, "Hey, I wrote this book. Oh, why did you write it?" Well, I wrote it for you. I wrote it for you. That makes me happy.
that
Ice cream
brilliant
makes me
answer.
happy. Sex makes me
Yeah.
happy. The usual things,
Yeah. But we're talking about you need those things in life.
Fulfilled. What makes me fulfilled?
Fulfilled,
Is
yeah.
making, is creating.
Speaking of these books, what do you think if you had the opportunity to talk to that 10-year-old James and say, "Hey, look what I did and wrote these books, did all those posters," what do you think he would say to you?
Oh fuck! Now you're gonna make me cry. I think he would dig that. I think he would dig that. Usually people say, "Hey, what would you say to your 10-year-old?" Instead of him saying to you. But that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think he'd say, "Don't you do anything nice?" I think he would say, "Wow, you make stickers and posters and stuff. That's cool. Let's make something together." Right? The same thing my kids say. Damn, Sean, got me.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I am on my own journey of reclaiming my creativity, and this is why your work speaks to me, why I want to have you on the show. I have a final question that I ask everyone. I just want to tie a bow on this idea of my belief. It's rooted in research too, but I want to ask you specifically, the guy doing this work, is how have you seen creativity? This is a commercial for all of us listening. How can creativity really help us live this enriched or this good life?
I think creativity is the core of it. Creativity is where our laughter comes from, right? Creativity is where our play comes from. Creativity is where our cooking comes from. Cooking is the greatest of arts because it is art. It's a little bit of science, and it feeds people. What is more beautiful than that? So I think it is without creativity and without, of course, the self-love that goes behind it. Without that, you got nothing. Literally nothing.
The image I have is, we talked about our perspective and lens at the beginning of the conversation, but without creativity, it might be a lens of black and white. Where creativity comes in, it's vibrant colors.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you, baby. It's you.
It's you.
It's you
It's you.
enjoying you, which is hard for people to do, right?
But what an amazing place to be. Well, James, the final question that I ask everyone is, let's imagine now you're at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are, but you're on your final days. You're sitting on a front porch, looking out at a view that brings you complete peace, ease, and contentment.
Mm.
And you say, "I did it. I lived a good life." So you decide to write your children's children a letter on what that life entailed, what made it a good life. What would be a theme to that message?
Mm. I think it would simply be. I mean, I'd love to, of course, write some, huge thing about fear, but I think it would be much more about never forgetting to play and keeping that in every part of your life. Not taking it so fucking seriously.
It's pretty short when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, James, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights. You have a couple books out. You have Feck Perfection, which has been out for 3 or 4 years, I believe.
Yeah, I think almost
But
5 years now. Yeah.
almost 5. Okay. And you have a new book. So let the listeners know why they should get this book, where they can get the new book and the old one, and where else can they find you online?
To find me, The place where I play the most is Instagram, which would be at James Victore. The place to find the book right now, it is exclusively through the website, which is heyweirdo.org. And why to get the book is, as it says at the top of the cover, this book will save your life.
Why not then? What? There's no better reason.
There's no better reason. Sean, thank
Well,
you.
James, I appreciate your work. I find you a fascinating guy, and I think I like your work so much because instead of being afraid of my weirdness, it's making me want to find more of my weirdness. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Cool. I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.